This is CNN Tonight. I'm Don Lemon. Here's the breaking news. A source close to President Trump telling CNN that the president now sees impeachment as a real possibility when Democrats take control of the House in January. Another source close to the White House tells CNN the issues causing the West Wing the most concern are the campaign finance violations alleged by prosecutors for the Southern District of New York. Those are the hush money payments. President Trump directed his former attorney, Michael Cohen, to make payments to Trump's alleged mistresses just before the 2016 election. Also breaking tonight, a bipartisan group of 44 former U.S. senators penning an op-ed in the Washington Post warning the country's entering what they call a dangerous period, saying the foundational principles of our democracy and our national security interests are at stake. They're calling on current senators to zealously safeguard our democracy. A lot to get to, so I want to bring in now Ryan Lizza, Julia Kayyem, and Greg Miller. He is the author of The Apprentice, Trump, Russia, and the Subversion of American Democracy. So good to have all of you on this evening. So let me start with you, Ryan. Here it is right here. You see what I'm reaching for. This is the letter that the op-ed that 44 senators wrote, saying we have to be guardians of our democracy. What does that say about the state of our country to you that you have these people doing this?
Well, first of all, it was mostly Democrats, but there were about a half a dozen or so Republicans in there. And it suggests that there are these people out there, former senators, who believe that the political system isn't quite grappling with the seriousness of what's going on, and they want to nudge their fellow senators and basically tell them to step up and take this a little more seriously than you have been, that what they're reading in the papers, what they're learning obviously from the Mueller investigation is serious, and to get out of their partisan thinking and make sure that just because, you know, this president might be of the same party, that you look at the allegations seriously and independently. We had a great example today with Orrin Hatch, who didn't do that.
Well, I just want to ask you, is that what they're saying? Okay, don't be like Orrin Hatch and say, it doesn't really matter. I don't care if it's a crime or not, or it's a Democrat, or you can make up a crime.
Look, if there was a headline of this piece, it was put the country before party, right? That's what they're saying.
Here's what a source close to the president is saying, Juliet, that Trump says that he has expressed concern that he could be impeached when the Dems take control of the House. Should he be worried?
Oh, yes. And I mean, it's actually sort of so rationally clear for him. And I think, I don't know if he will be impeached. That's a lot of senators that have to defect to actually have the impeachment stick. But I think it's absurd to take impeachment off the table. I know, Jim Comey yesterday, the former FBI director, was, said in New York, we just have to vote him out in 2020. There's nothing I've seen over the last 2 years that would suggest this thing is stopping. If any, it's gotten closer to the White House. It's worse than any of us ever imagined. It's about, sex and payoffs and Russia collusion and contacts with the Russians. I say it's on the table. I've never said that before. I don't know where it heads, and the president ought to be worried.
Well, that's one thing we should know. I mean, when you're talking about sex and paying off porn stars, listen, folks in the Bible Belt in the middle of the country and evangelicals, they will never stand for this, right? That was sarcasm.
I'll be the last person to speak for them. Yeah, I know. I'd be the last person to speak for them. But just picking up on Ryan's point, though. Yeah. Look, people have been waiting for a eureka moment when the country stands up and says, let's fight. It may just be a lot of dribbles and raindrops and trickles down until a moment in which it's not sustainable. And this letter is a part of that. Okay. It's not going to be the next day we wake up.
All right, Greg, I want to bring you in now, and I want you to check out this list. 16 Trump associates, 16 of them who have contacts with Russia. And this is just the people we know about. Do you think there are even more, possibly?
I think that there's always a chance that there's more. We keep learning more and more, seems almost every week in this saga. And I think that, you look at that list, and one of the amazing things about it is it's hard to, as far as I know, not one of them ever reached out to the FBI or reported any of these contacts in a way that indicated that any of them were troubled by their interactions with Russia. The way that you would expect people who are interested in public service to be.
Yeah. So they didn't report it, as you said, to your knowledge, but some of them did lie about their contacts to the FBI.
That's right. That's right. There were lots of attempts to cover these things up. I mean, the other thing that I think that's interesting about this is just sort of, on both sides, on the Russian side and on the Trump side and his inner circle, their tradecraft here was so clumsy across the board that it hasn't been that hard, really, for Robert Mueller to piece together astonishing details about all of these contacts.
Ryan, President Trump has insisted repeatedly that his campaign had nothing to do with Russia. Take a listen to this.
I have nothing to do with Putin. I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does.
It has nothing to do what they started out looking for Russians involved in our campaign. There were none.
I have nothing to do with Russia. There is no collusion. We had nothing to do with Russia.
So far we know, and here's a list of 16 people. There, you see that list? Does that look like, I mean, you had to squeeze the font smaller so that they could fit all on one page in case I needed to reference them. That's 16 people. Does that look like nothing to do with Russia?
That's a lot of people. And I mean, what we've learned most directly is that right through 2016, he was, and his company was still negotiating this building deal in Russia. I mean, to me, that's the most important revelation of the last few weeks, because that means that while he was taking positions as a candidate on Putin, on sanctions, on what to do about Russia, he was also trying to get something from Moscow, right? Yeah. To me, that's one of the most, that might not even be illegal, but in terms of an abuse of his position at the time is pretty serious.
It has nothing to do. I wonder what something to do with Russia.
Well, he just lies. He can't. He just denies things all the time. But can I just say one thing about impeachment?
Sure.
I mean, we have never had a scandal of this magnitude in a president's first term. All the big possible impeachment scandals were second-term issues, right? Watergate really flowered after Nixon's reelection. Mm-hmm. Iran-Contra, which obviously didn't lead to impeachment, that was a second-term issue, and the Monica Lewinsky scandal, second term. So we're kind of in this unusual position with a big, explosive, potential abuse of power scandal before a president's reelection. And there are a number of ways that this could go down. People, if things are that serious, he could. Republicans could call on him to resign. He could be primaried and lose in a primary, or a lot of people could say, you know what? There's an election campaign coming up the way Comey did. That's the way to deal with this, not with impeachment. Just let the American people decide. So I don't think impeachment is a foregone conclusion, even if the allegations in the final Mueller report are extremely serious.
Julia, you're the security expert. I want to follow up on something that Greg said earlier, that not one of these people reported this to the FBI. What kind of red flags does that raise to you?
Well, I think they were willing. So this is what's important to remember. The FBI's investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 election was concerned with both campaigns because of some internet activity that they saw. And so their concern was that the Russians were going to take advantage of either the Trump or Clinton campaign. What ended up happening, to their dismay, obviously, as we've seen, is that the Trump campaign was the only campaign that actually wanted it. None of these people, not only did they not call the FBI, they actively engaged in it, whether it's Donald Trump Jr. and the Trump Tower meeting, whether it's the financial issues involved with Manafort and others, and the president himself. So either you believe that these 16 people are the biggest idiots in the world and had no idea that they were getting played, or you believe this was, the Russians could not believe how great this was, because they found 16 plus people who were willing to play with them, and they had something, of course, on Donald Trump, which is his financial desires regarding Trump Moscow. So, I mean, it was a win-win for the two of them, for those two parties, and a total loss for the American public.
Stand by. I know you want to get him around, but I just want to get Greg in here. Greg, this list includes 2 of Trump's children, his son-in-law, his longtime personal lawyer, campaign chairman. Is there any way that these meetings and conversations were happening without Trump's blessing?
Well, I mean, it's hard to fathom that his inner circle and as you say, his closest parts of his inner circle would do things that they thought might go against their father or father-in-law's wishes. I mean, we're still waiting for proof or evidence that he was actually in the loop on these meetings. It's hard to imagine that he wasn't. I know that the House Democrats and the Intelligence Committee are really keen to speak again with Jared Kushner and with Donald Trump Jr. to ask that very question, to go back over this timeline about Donald Trump Jr.'s calls to a blacked out number while he was, negotiating this interaction with Russians at Trump Tower. Who was he calling? He claimed he couldn't remember. I mean, there are reasons to suspect that Trump was looped in on this, and that's one of the big questions that we are waiting for Mueller or someone else to answer.
Ryan, I'll get you on the other side. I got to get to a break. Everybody stay with me. A source says that alleged Russian spy Maria Butina has changed her plea and is now cooperating with federal prosecutors. What could she know? Alleged Russian spy Maria Butina is now cooperating with federal prosecutors. As part of the plea deal, she's admitting that she conspired in the U.S. for Russia. Ryan, Juliet, and Greg are back with me. Every day, there's something else. Greg, how significant is it that an alleged Russian spy is now cooperating with federal prosecutors?
Well, it's a really remarkable development in many ways, right? I mean, Robert Mueller has already indicted quite a number of Russian individuals, but they're beyond reach of the U.S. government. Nobody really believes that they will ever be brought to the United States and prosecuted. So here's somebody who has been working on behalf of the Kremlin in the United States for a number of years, who's not only here, not only facing legal consequence, but actually prosecuting. It's quite an interesting development.
Butina asked the then candidate Trump a question at a 2015 campaign event. Take a listen.
I'm visiting from Russia, so my question...
Putin. Good friend of Obama, Putin.
My
He likes
question...
Obama a lot. Go ahead.
If you would be elected as a president, what will be your foreign politics, especially in the relationships with my country? And do you want to continue the politics of sanctions that are damaging of both economy, or you have any other ideas?
Okay. Obama gets along with nobody. The whole world hates us. I know Putin, and I'll tell you what, we get along with Putin. I believe I would get along very nicely with Putin. Okay?
Okay, Ryan, I'm going to let you have a crack at it because, by the way, Butina was the first person he called on. Is that a coincidence?
I don't know. I mean, look, the Russians obviously were trying to penetrate our elections in every way possible, right? And some of the campaigns were very sophisticated, as with the hacking and dumping campaigns, and a lot of them just looked almost random, right? Like, is this Butina really a master spy, someone who got up at a public event and asked Trump a question? And if you look at the stuff that's come out today, it seems like she kind of bumbled into this relationship with the Russian government, and they were like, yes, go see whatever links you can get, right? She doesn't strike me as the greatest Russian spy ever to hit our soil, but that doesn't, that doesn't mean she didn't commit crimes. Yeah. I mean, with a lot of these people, I keep thinking of what Deep Throat said during Watergate to Woodward. He said, these are not very bright guys and things got out of hand, right? So I don't necessarily think we're looking at criminal geniuses, but you don't have to be a criminal genius to commit crimes.
Are you talking about Putin, or are you talking about the people
I'm just
who
talking
contact?
about that list that you put up there. And look, Trump, I keep coming back to this. At that moment, when he's talking about how great he gets along with Putin, he was trying to build a building in Moscow that would have made him millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah, but even if you're not, I don't know. Even if you cannot read the speed limit on a highway, let's just put it that way.
Absolutely.
I don't want to say not smart enough or whatever. Even if you're less than smart and you can't do that, you still get a ticket for speeding.
100%. I'm just saying, sometimes we think of this as this very complicated criminal conspiracy where everything was well thought out. To me, it looks like a bunch of not the brightest people in the world, but stupid people committing crimes are still criminals.
But isn't that's the defense, Juliet, in a way, saying, I mean, we're getting a little far afield here, saying, oh, well, we're just bumbled. We didn't know. We were just, we didn't
That's
know.
not
No, I mean, I think two things. I mean, one is just to Ryan's point, one of the greatest things coming out of today was the reporting that Erickson, that's the boyfriend the Republican operative boyfriend, literally writes down on a piece of paper how to respond to FSB, that's the intelligence agency in Russia, offer of employment. He actually writes down, should I do treason for my country or not? So these are not the smartest people, but to put it in context of, though, the impact of it. While it's, there are lots of bumbling, lots of characters that you can't, like, it's not even that you can't imagine they're next to the president. Like, none of us have ever met people like this in our lives. I mean, this group of people are, sort of not your typical people you meet in normal employment. But, obviously the impact of Putin's success here in the United States has not only sort of undermined our democratic processes and led to these illegalities, but just look at the world today. I mean, look at France, look at England, look at, what is happening with this post-World War II order, which has been undermined significantly by the fact that the U.S. is not checking Russia's aggression, either in Western Europe or in countries closer to Russia. So, so Putin has sort of won this part. I have great confidence he doesn't win the war, but it has had an impact when you just look around the world right now in terms of the world order. And he was able to destroy because Trump was willing to play along with him.
Yeah. So listen, I got to say this. It's important to note that this was the first time that Trump mentioned a Russian sanction relief when we're talking about that response to Butina. And Greg, so let me ask you this. Butina also met with Don Jr. at an NRA event and socialized with former Trump campaign aide J.D. Gordon. Do you think there's any way to explain this access to so close to the Trump campaign on multiple occasions?
I mean, I think it was her handler, Torshin, who met with Don Jr. as well. And, as Ryan said, this was just a multi-directional attempt by Russia to penetrate all parts of the American political landscape in 2016. And I would say that there's a brazenness to this effort that is really mind-boggling in many ways. I mean, you just showed footage of Butina popping up at a public event asking a question of the future president of the United States. I mean, you had to know that the Kremlin is really enjoying that moment back in Moscow. The hack of the DNC was not all that sophisticated, really, and the Russians were putting ads on Facebook and paying in rubles. I mean, there's a sort of a brazen quality to this entire campaign that gets at, there's some taunting that's going on here. They're not really too worried about covering their tracks. They're trying to make it known that they are messing with us, and they are showing Russians, for Vladimir Putin's benefit, and Americans that we can be messed with.
Yeah. Greg, Ryan, Juliet, thank you for your time. I appreciate it. We'll be right back. Democrats appear to be sharpening their knives as they prepare to regain control of the House, and sources tell CNN that Trump is concerned that impeachment is a, quote, real possibility. I want to bring in now Democratic Congressman Eric Swalwell, who sits on the House Judiciary Committee and is also a member of the House Intel Committee. Congressman, thank you for joining us.
Good evening, Don. Thanks for having me back.
So as I just said, we're hearing the president is worried tonight. Should he be?
What is this guy just learning constitutional law for the first time? If you commit a bunch of abuses in office, you get a free pass? Is that what he thought? I mean, Don, that's crazy. The days of presidential immunity are over. We're going to conduct fairer investigations than he deserves, but there's not going to be a rush to judgment here. We're going to put together an impenetrable case, and if he crossed a red line, he'll be held accountable. But first things first, we also think we can collaborate with him on immigration, on infrastructure, on the DREAM Act, on the Voting Rights Act. So there's a lot that's going to be happening in the next couple of weeks.
So for people who think, oh my gosh, they're ready now, the knives are sharpening, and they wanted the impeachment isn't all, they're going to do it. What do you say?
I say, again, we're going to put together an impenetrable case, and we're not going to be as reckless with the facts as he is.
All right. So, listen, White House officials are telling CNN that they don't think campaign finance violations would bring bipartisan support for impeachment. Are they minimizing the crimes that have allegedly taken place?
I see it as propensity evidence, and in the law that means that shows that maybe a prior bad act, like paying off a porn star, would show that he acted in similar ways in other situations. So I don't necessarily think we should go all in on that payoff, but I think it does show that this shadowy operator and the people around him probably did the same thing when it came to Russia, when it came to Saudi Arabia, when it came to China, and that's really where we should be looking.
Can you imagine, I mean, when you said paying off a porn star, it is hard to believe that that's what we're talking about with the President of the United States, right?
Yeah, but I also think, Don, that looking at what happened with the Clinton impeachment trial and that he came out even stronger, we don't want to martyrize President Trump, especially when there's a lot more alarming conduct that actually affects people in their everyday lives that we should be looking to stop and intervene where we can.
So, Congressman Jerry Nadler, I just want to play this, what he said about the SDNY prosecutor's allegations that Trump directed his attorney, Michael Cohen, his fixer, to commit a felony by paying off 2 women over alleged affairs. Here it is.
They would be impeachable offenses. Whether they are important enough to justify an impeachment is a different question, but certainly they'd be impeachable offenses because even though they were committed before the president became president, they were committed in the service of fraudulently obtaining the office.
So obviously the allegations against the president haven't been proven, but if they are, do you agree with Congressman Nadler that they are impeachable offenses?
I think that they're instructive as to the way that he works. If this is all we have, I would say we shouldn't hang our hat on that. But I think we should look at this in the light of this is probably how he conducted himself in his business and personal life. And so we should get his taxes, take an MRI to his finances, understand if he's making decisions based on his financial interests rather than traditional American values.
Yeah. Listen, I'll ask you a similar question, same question but a different way that I asked a moment ago. A lot of Democrats are eager to impeach the president but have no idea what the final report from the special counsel's office, what will it entail. Do you think that Democrats should stop all the impeachment talk until then?
As it relates to Russia, we should wait for Bob Mueller's report. But we should still get his taxes. We should still see, when it comes to the Jamal Khashoggi case, which is happening in real time, and we see his prior financial relationships with the Saudis, and that's driving his decisions here, we should understand that. And Don, we can't forget that he received a $500 million loan from the Chinese during the same week that he eased sanctions on a Chinese company. So there's a lot to look at, a lot of financial entanglements he has. And again, the days of getting free passes on those are over.
Congressman, where do you come down on a sitting president being indicted? Because, you know, there's back and forth. Oh, well, he can or he can't. Where do you come down with this?
Well, I don't agree that he cannot, but if that's the DOJ policy, I think we should look at extending the statute of limitations if a DOJ policy prevents someone from being indicted. It should just pause until that person gets out of office. They shouldn't be able to escape being held accountable because they win re-election. And Don, there's also an issue here that because the president may fear he's going to go to jail if he doesn't win re-election, he may be acting erratically as we get closer to the presidential election to try and save his own skin.
Congressman, I want to play what the former FBI Director James Comey said in front of a live audience at New York City's 92nd Street Y about the possibility of impeachment. He did this over the weekend. Here it is.
I hope Donald Trump is not removed from office by impeachment because it would let the country off the hook. And it would drive into the fabric of our nation a third of the people believing there was a coup. And we need a moment of inflection where we all get off the couch and say, that is not who we are, and in a landslide, rid ourselves of this attack on our values?
I think a lot of people feel that way. Do you think he has a point?
He does have a point, Don, and if I had my way, we would impeach him at the ballot box and prove that democracy works. But we also have a rule of law, and no one's above the law, especially the president. And if he crossed clear, bright, red lines, he's going to have to be held accountable, and it's going to be a tough, choice for the nation and the Congress. But I think the best thing we can do is to just assure the American people we're going to do our job in conducting oversight and looking at what he's done and seek bipartisan buy-in if he's crossed the line.
Congressman Swalwell, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks, Don.
New incidents of hate speech and violence throughout the country continuing a troubling trend. She suffered a number of major internal injuries. Her aorta was severed. She also had lacerations to her lungs and liver. The jury found Fields guilty on a number of counts, one of them being first-degree murder, which is punishable by up to life in prison. Ultimately, the judge in the case will decide Fields' sentence, but will consider the jury's recommendation. Fields also faces 30 federal hate crimes charges in a separate case. Following the deadly violence in Charlottesville, President Trump infamously said this about what happened there.
But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did.
Very fine people now. First-degree murder. Joining me now is Wes Lowery, national reporter for The Washington Post. Wes, good evening to you.
Thanks for having me, Don.
So obviously nothing can be done to repair the damage done at Charlottesville, but do you think justice was served?
Certainly. Well, I think for Heather Heyer's family, at least, and for the other victims, you have to remember there were dozens of people who were injured. Heather Heyer was fortunately the only person who was killed, but there were dozens of people who were injured when James Fields plowed his car into those ralliers. For those folks, they have received some measure of justice, but you can't imagine that this makes it much easier for Heather Heyer's family. And I think that for many Americans who are still scarred and traumatized by the idea even that there was a massive rally of Nazis in Charlottesville, Virginia, and these outward displays of hatred and far-right violence that we've seen increasingly in recent years.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything that can make it better for Heather Heyer's family, and our thoughts go out to her. We can only imagine. We can only imagine. Wes, you know, the president said there were very fine people on both sides. But remember, it was just a few months ago he started calling himself a nationalist. Watch this.
They have a word. It sort of became old-fashioned. It's called a nationalist. And I say, really, we're not supposed to use that word. You know what I am? I'm a nationalist, okay? I'm a nationalist. I'm proud of our country, and I am a nationalist. It's a word that hasn't been used too much. Some people use it, but I'm very proud. I think it should be brought back. Call me a nationalist if you'd like.
So, Wes, do you think the president takes hate and white nationalism seriously?
I think that time and time again, the President of the United States has shown an unwillingness to unequivocally denounce these far-right groups and their violence and their rhetoric. He has very often employed language that mirrors their own language. That, you know, there's that line that Andrew Gillum used back in the Florida race about his then opponent, where he said, "I'm not saying you're a racist, but the racists think you're a racist," right? What the president has done time and time again, and not just as the president, going back even to the campaign trail, is employ the language of these far-right groups, white nationalist groups, racist groups, receiving the endorsements and the full-throated supports of people like David Duke, and then pretending to not know who David Duke is. And so what we know is that, you know, I obviously don't know the president personally and can't speak to whether or not, you know, he actually personally believes any of these things. But what I do know is he's played coy and he's played cute with these groups, and he certainly hasn't decried their support and pushed it away. In fact, he's done things that many people, many experts think have only emboldened these groups.
Yeah. Wes, let's talk about some more incidents. Is there a number that we can talk about? Authorities in Pittsburgh investigating anti-Semitic pamphlets that were found around Pittsburgh, including Squirrel Hill. We know that's where the 11 members of the Tree of Life Synagogue were gunned down back in October. And then in Ohio today, the FBI announced the arrest of a man allegedly planning attacks against synagogues. Here's what the ADL found, that a 57% increase in anti-Semitic incidents in 2017. It is looking like 2018 was not much better than that.
Of course, and by most measures, not only the ADL's measures, the SPLC's measures, the Global Terrorism Task Force measures, by most measures, by every measure we can find, there is an increase in this right-wing violence and far-right violence, right? Whether that's anti-Semitic, whether it's anti-LGBT, anti-black, anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant. And what the experts believe is that that violence correlates to the coarsening of our political rhetoric, specifically on the political right, that we saw a massive increase in these militia groups and far-right groups after the election of Barack Obama, but that these violent attacks, like we saw in Pittsburgh and in Kentucky, and like we saw even here at CNN with the bombs being mailed in just a few weeks ago, that the way that our political rhetoric has coarsened is only emboldening these types of people, and that statements like the president's, where he says, you know, there are very fine people on both sides of Charlottesville, what the experts believe is that those types of statements certainly don't discourage far right-wing violence or Nazi violence or anti-Semitic violence. In fact, that they perhaps encourage encourage that type of violence.
Wes Lowry, always appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you very much.
Of course, thanks for having me, Doug.
Time Magazine announcing its Person of the Year in just hours. 2 people on the short list, President Trump and Robert. Time Magazine set to name its 2018 Person of the Year tomorrow morning. The title is about the influence of the person or persons over the past year. It's not necessarily an honor. This year's shortlist includes President Trump, but it also includes Robert Mueller, the separated families, and the murdered Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. President Trump loves the magazine and has a fascination with Time. Since his very first appearance back in 1989 with a somewhat flattering nod to his brashness. Those covers have been significantly more critical since he was elected president. His immigration policies, portrayal of being in over his head, and Trump being portrayed as a monarch have probably not gone over well. I don't know, as the first one he did. Look at those covers. The president is so enraptured with Time, at least 5 of the Trump Organization's golf clubs in America and Europe have displayed this. It's a fake cover with the headline, Donald Trump, the Apprentice, is a television smash. That is not a real cover. It is a fake. The magazine even asked for the fake covers to be taken down. What else is fake? This claim.
I think I was on the cover of Time magazine twice in my life, and like 6 times in the last number of months. So you tell me, which is more important, real estate or politics? Okay, that's the way. Is that true, Harold? So I have 6 for politics, and I have 2 for real estate, or whatever they put me on for.
Nope. Nope. At that time, it had just been once, not 6. So last year, Trump claimed that he was on the verge of getting the honor back-to-back. He also said Time gave him a heads up beforehand. That turned out to be at least a case, maybe a misunderstanding, or at worst, the worst case is a lie. The magazine said they don't comment on who gets picked until the cover is published. It's part of a sort of annual tradition for the president, from lobbying for his inclusion to claiming others said he should be, or to the criticizing Time for the other people chosen. The president has been talking and tweeting about this for years. So what else is new? So here's a question. Could individual 1 be named the Person of the Year? I want to bring in now Brian Stelter and Elena Plott, the White House correspondent for The Atlantic. Good evening.
Evening.
So let's see. He last won Person of the Year 2016.
Yeah.
Really wanted to win it back-to-back years. It didn't happen. So what is, I don't know. Is he going to win? Make your case.
I think he's the man,
You think he's going to win?
I think it is Trump. Here's why. The Time Person of the Year, it marks a moment where we are as a country and as a society. And like it or not, Trump is the sun. Everything else revolves around him. Politics and culture, all of the above. Some people love him, some hate him. Some think he's crazy like a fox, others think he's just crazy. You go to a dinner party or something, people are telling you Trump's mentally ill. Others say he's a hero, he's a villain. People are arguing about Trump 2 years in. Even though the midterms swung in the Democrats' favor, it was a referendum on Trump. Yeah. So I think the Time editors, looking at all the options, they're going to end up with the obvious option. The reason why I might be wrong, though, he did win in 2016. It's only been 2 years. The difference now is he wouldn't be honored for winning the election. This would be a recognition of the scandals and problems that are plaguing his presidency.
You may be onto something because, I go to a party or something. Try to talk to me about Trump.
Right. Well, no, try not to. Try
no.
minutes without
I want you to do it. Try to talk to me about Trump.
Wait, what do you mean? What do you think of President Trump, Don?
Oh, you know what? Hey, how's your drink? It's good to see you.
You try to change the subject?
All the time. We have in my household, we have a no talk about Trump policy.
Oh, really?
Especially,
And it works.
Because that's all people want to talk about.
Every time
I'm out to dinner, people come up to us. My boyfriend and I out, they come up to us. So we say, no Trump talk, right? How's the weather? Elena, you're Team Mueller for Person of the Year. Why is that?
So as all reporters know well, there haven't been a ton of consistencies in the Trump administration, save for, I think, its reaction to the specter of Mueller and what he might find in his Russia probe, that final report. I don't know if you guys saw, but Sean Spicer the other day tweeted and quickly deleted a link to a predicted kind of betting pool for how many times Trump would tweet about Robert Mueller before the end of the year. And I think if you can say that you occupy that much headspace in the the leader of the free world, it's a pretty powerful position to be in.
Yeah, I'm thinking Trump occupies everyone else's brain space, but Mueller's the one that occupies Trump's brain space.
Exactly.
But don't let me get persuaded. I'm not gonna.
No, maybe she did.
I think Mueller's going to be next year's Time Person of the Year.
Well, Brian,
there's so much we still don't know about Mueller's probe. That's why I think he's going to be next year's winner.
Brian, admit it when you're wrong, because think about this. She's right. Occupies the space, right? And people talk about the Russia investigation, and even on Trump's favorite channels or conservative, they're always talking about, oh, it's a wish on it, whatever. That's what he talks about. That's all. That's most of the things he tweets about.
That is true, and look, part of that obsession that makes you wonder why is he so worried. An innocent man doesn't worry this much about an investigation, but that's neither here nor there. Look, if it's not Trump or Mueller, I think it should be the year of the woman, right?
Let me go over some of them.
In 2018. The problem, of course, is it shouldn't just be 1 year of the women. So I'm not sure about that nomination either.
Both of you, let me go over this. How much time do we have? Do we have a little bit of time? Okay, so we have Donald Trump.
Right.
I think it's an important one, the separated families. Let me go to Elena first. What do you think, Elena?
I think it's been one of the major cultural touchstones of the year, specifically because it ties into an issue such as, immigration and potentially demonization of other races that really dominated the narrative of Donald Trump's campaign. So the issue of separated families, I think, really shows kind of the fruition of what people really feared most, perhaps, from Trump's campaign.
Other people we put it up. We've got Vladimir Putin that's up there, Ryan Coogler, Christine Blasey Ford. We mentioned Jamal Khashoggi. March for Our Lives activists, I think that they stand a chance. Moon Jae-in and Meghan Markle, the Korean president, obviously, but Meghan Markle. I think that separated families and March for Our Lives activists also have a chance. Go ahead, Brian.
The reason why the Parkland students and the other gun control advocates stand a chance is because they are working on a long-term solution. They thought about the ballot box this year, but they're also thinking about 2020 and beyond. And there was something inspiring about the way young people were motivated this year to take action. Last year, Time went with the Me Too movement, the silence breakers, the women in many different fields who came forward and spoke out against harassment. Well, I think we saw equally powerfully this year were these testimonies, both from young people and from parents of gun violence victims. And it would be nice to see those elevated to a national platform like this cover.
Go ahead. Do you want to talk about that?
I just think that Brian is completely right. And I think one of the reasons they haven't been elevated to that national platform is because of this 24/7 news cycle. I mean, it really is such a shame that we talk about people like the Parkland activists only in the aftermath of a mass shooting, and then it fades into the background. So in many ways, I think putting the Parkland activists on the cover would, restart a conversation that not only needs to start again, but continue for much longer than it has.
Yeah. So let's see what happens.
Well, I'm still thinking with Trump.
No. What happens if, let's say it is him. He'll say, of course they got it right, but if it doesn't, it should have been me.
That's the thing. Now, 2 years ago, he said this is an incredible honor. And it's true what you were saying before. He does care about the cover of Time magazine.
He does.
In the same way he cares about CNN and the New York Times and SNL. But if he's on the cover tomorrow, it's not an honor this year. So much has changed in the past 2 years. If he's on the cover tomorrow, it's because of the scandals and controversies that plague his administration. The fact that it's hard for him to even find a chief of staff. That's why he'll be on the cover if he is tomorrow, if I'm right.
Okay. Most of the people on the short list are connected to political fault lines.
Yeah.
Time ran a readers poll. K-pop band BTS. I guess I'm not
That's
young
all about
enough
passion.
for that. Okay.
That shows you who has the most passionate fans in the world. Don, your fans are a close second.
Okay, I know, I got to go, but it will be an honor to be on there. I've been on there 15 times, you know that, right?
Hey.
Thank you both, I appreciate it. Thanks for
Thanks,
watching.
Don.
Our coverage continues.